So when I was asked to come and give a talk, I made it very clear I'm not actually a Xenakis scholar, and I'm not an architecture expert either, but I thought it would be worth it anyways to talk about the sort of connections between science, technology, and art at CIRMMT in sort of general terms as being part of the legacy of Xenakis in general terms of linking science with art. So I'm Sean Ferguson. I'm the director of the Center for Interdisciplinary Research in Music, Media, and Technology, housed at the Schulz School of Music at McGill University. Excuse me. So I just wanted to give a very brief overview of CIRMMT at the beginning, talk about related research, and I mean research related to the work of Xenakis, as far as I can tell. I've just sort of picked some, hopefully, interesting projects that seem to relate to some of the issues that we've been talking about even the last couple of days, and then just give a preview of an event that's coming up right in the fall. Right, just very so CIRMMT was founded in the year 2000 as a network, which means that it was just made up of a bunch of satellite labs. There was no actual center itself. And we're for the last year and a half, 2 years, we've been funded now as an actual research center by both the interesting thing here is that we're funded by both the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Quebec and the Natural Sciences and Engineering Council, and there are not that many centers that are funded that way. The directors have been Wisław Wojcik, who was the founding director in year 2000 for a year. Michio Fujinaga was acting director, and then Stephen McAdams, who I'm sure most of you know, was the director from 2004 to 2009. He really had a transformative effect on the center, and really, I would say, gave it a very clear vision. And I've been director since last summer. So the structure is, I just wanted to mention that one of the things that was not the case at the beginning of CIRMMT was that there wasn't an artistic practice associated with the center. And one of the conditions of Stephen accepting the directorship was that there would be actual artistic practice, that there would be music taking place. And so he asked me to be Associate Director Artistic in 2006, and it was my job to try and make that happen. And so now we have a full year of concerts, and we host all artistic research is considered to be equally as valid as scientific and technological research. I was the music chair for the ICMC last summer. Which was presented partly by CIRMMT. So a lot has changed, but it wasn't actually the case at the beginning, I have to say. We have about 48 members, 150 students. It's a center, not an institute, so we don't give classes or we don't give degrees. We have a number of different research initiatives that we provide our members, travel funding, what we call the Strategic Innovation Fund, which is sort of seed grant for crazy interdisciplinary projects that people might not be able to get funded regularly, etc. We have a loan pool of equipment, and we have, of course, laboratories. Just let me make sure I don't go too fast here or too slowly. So CIRMMT, starting with the overview now, is housed in the new music building of the Schulz School of Music in Montreal, and this is quite recent. This building is only about 4 years old, so we occupy the top floor of this building. We have an extensive loan pool. So one of the things that we have is just a lot of gear that people can use, from a wireless real-time audience response system where I think we can work with 100 people in concert in real time. We can get either passive data, galvanic skin response, respiration, all these types of information, but we can also get active feedback from audience members in form of a sort of a two-dimensional axis on iPod Touches, actually. We have a large portable recording system. We have an ultrasound machine for people who want to investigate respirology and singers and woodwind players or things like this, computing, etc., etc. The important thing is that all of this, like everything, all of it's equally available to all CIRMMT members. So any CIRMMT member has the right to sign up this gear and use it for their research. It's not associated with a particular researcher. Our laboratories, so the network of satellite labs that existed previously between our members are at McGill University, the University of Montreal, and the University of Sherbrooke. That still exists and is still active, but we also have our fixed labs now. We have 6 that are, each of them is sort of conceived for a specific purpose. And they have a default equipment associated with them that you can always count will be there when you go in. And they also have specific acoustics. This might be of interest to people in architecture, which is that one of the biggest challenge of this almost is the acoustical design of these labs, because they have to be completely soundproof to the outside world, but they also have to have different sort of responses depending on the type of activity that we want to take place in them. I just have here very quickly some examples of 3 of the labs. So this is the critical listening room. So it's for evaluation of recordings, archival recordings and mastering recordings, any time when you need to listen under the best possible conditions. So we have a 5.1 surround system, and as you can see, there's no computer in here. All of our noise-making equipment is in a machine room that's far away and doesn't contribute any noise to the room. We also have a spatial acoustics. I thought this might be interesting because it has to do, it's not an anechoic room, but it's quite dead. So people can go in here and work with surround sound. You see that one of our researchers has their speaker set up in there. And finally, we have what we call the Immersive Presence Laboratory, which this is a dome of loudspeakers, 24 loudspeakers. And I'll talk about this more later on because I'm going to highlight a project that used it. So here, what you don't see is normally we can have 3 large screen plasma displays there that allow us to, people work on with, say for instance, ultra video conferencing there. But the important thing is that the acoustics are specific for this room. They're changeable, and that we have this dome there that researchers can use. Excuse me. So, of course, when you go back, you have to go through all this. Speaking of the nonlinearity of time, so I wanted to talk about one of the projects I wanted to talk about had to do with sort of virtual architectural acoustics. This is sort of a trivia thing, but I was actually in residence at CIRMMT, which is of course the Centre de Création Musicale Xenakis, after I guess the bomb blew up and it ended up at La Tourette. I don't know if, I have to talk because I don't know if there's anything going on there now, but I know that very shortly after this. They stopped actually accepting people for residencies. But I was there for 3 weeks. It was a great time. And I don't know if you know Stéphane Tidia, but he was there and he helped me out. It was kind of a great experience for me. And you can't see it, but through that window was this beautiful meadow, and I could see the woods. It was really terrific. I hope that continues to happen there. So that's my closest connection to Xenakis. Was in residence there, and. On the right-hand side of this is the chapel. I don't know, is it the chapel that it was called? Yeah, of La Tourette. And they allowed people to go to the Mass. So I went to Sunday Mass there. And it was very interesting because someone yesterday said that because of his monocular vision that Xenakis was designing spaces in terms of their acoustics rather than their two-dimensionality, visual two-dimensionality. And we're at the back of the chapel here looking forward, and so the priest is all the way on the other end, and you can't see it very well, but on the left and the right-hand side there are, what's the button here? On this side and this side are the seats where the people sit. This would actually be for the choir, I think, back here, but the service is down at the other end, and that's, I think, the organ. But I wasn't sitting very far from the priest, but I couldn't make out a single word he was saying. All you hear is the acoustics, and I couldn't help. I thought to myself, what the voice of the architect is drowning out the voice of God in a certain sense in this situation, because it was so unbelievably reverberant. I know that this was not the final design because there were supposed to be sort of round shapes that would be on the wall that would help diffuse the sound a little bit, but honestly, there's no way with that amount of volume that you would be able to tame that very much. I mean, I'd have to hang rugs everywhere and have big bass traps in the corners. It would completely ruin the whole thing. So it's the importance of acoustics and on architecture, of course, is not, I don't know about other places, but certainly in Canada, I don't think it's very, very well, it's not taken into account of that much in my opinion. And it's not very well understood. I know I won't go into much detail, but I think that it's something that possibly should be more of interest. So what I want to talk now about is architectural acoustics, but virtual architectural acoustics. So I want to just talk about one particular project. In this case, it's the Virtual Haydn project. So this is Tom Bagan. This is a kind of a nice example of a CIRMMT project because they're supposed to be interdisciplinary and collaborative. So Tom Bagan is a musicologist in the Faculty of Music, and he's a forte pianist. He's a specialist in early music, and he wanted to record an album of the complete Haydn keyboard works. And he wanted to record them in the original spaces in which they had been performed. But of course, first of all, it would be expensive to go there and record them. But second of all, I mean, they're not soundproof rooms at all. So there's trucks going by, there are people talking outside that you would hear. So they decided to go and do multi-channel impulse response measurements of the different spaces in which Haydn's music would have been performed, and to record the piece essentially anechoically or as dryly as possible, and then place the instruments in these virtual spaces. I'm just going to, whoops, I told myself I wouldn't do that, but I did it. So this is the CIRMMT website. This is Stephen McAdams here, right? He's going to disappear in a second, but that's him right there. So if I take a look, this ended up being the Naxos's first Blu-ray disc release, and it's a 5.1 surround release. And they have a whole website here that describes, mention all these people are CIRMMT members: Tom Bagan, Martha DeFrancisco, and Wisław Waszczyk. So we really have something which is people working in a lot of different domains. A sound recording engineer in the middle. Wisław calls himself a virtual architectural acoustician, something like this. I can't remember the name that he uses now; it's escaped me. And Tom Bagan, of course, is an early music specialist. And if we look at the Blu-ray set, I'd just like to very quickly. There's a short little video here just to give you an example of what it is. So this is inside the CIRMMT Immersive Presence Laboratory.
Okay.
The tension mounts.
Okay.
So of course these are all, what you're hearing is a virtual acoustics.
All right. So we're ready here, and we're recording take one.
So there's a 90-minute video that comes with this release.
Our first conversation, Tom and I had.
The point is just that it explains it all. He was recording in that room, and it was made to be extremely dry, and they were adding the multi-channel impulse response measurements later. I mean, the funny thing is, if you listen to it, here, for instance, is a recording of one of them. This is in a formal music salon. This kind of disappointing thing is that it's reverb. I mean, we've heard sort of fake reverb before, and it's very good reverb, and it's the authentic reverb of those spaces, and it's got a certain kind of density and authenticity that we wouldn't get in the synthesized reverberation. But what we miss is that this was, of course, the reverb was done in this dome of 24 loudspeakers, and it's when you listen to it, even on the Blu-ray release with 5 loudspeakers, you don't get the whole effect. So. I can take credit for this one, that I had the idea that it would be nice to do that in concert. And so what we have as another part of our loan pool is this concert production equipment. And here we have 24 speakers with 4 subs, and they're very good quality speakers. We have, if you see here, I don't know if it's noticeable, but there's an outer ring of 12 speakers. And then we have a middle ring of 8, and then at the top we have an inner ring of 4 loudspeakers, and these speaker stands will go up more than 2 stories. They go up 20-some feet in the air. And so the nice thing about it was that we were able to let people hear it in real time. We took all the rendering equipment down to this is the School of Music's multimedia room, and actually play it for people. And it was really spectacular. You really got this feeling that you were in a different space. You can't make the space seem smaller than it is, but in these large grand spaces, it was quite effective. So that's it's interesting. It's kind of a funny project as well, because we normally associate contemporary music with cutting-edge technology. And here, this is actually finding a place for early music research and musicology and early performance practice. There was another aspect of it was that these instruments were built. They were newly built instruments that were models of the originals. Sometimes people say, well, that's not very authentic. You should have used instruments from the period, right? But on the other hand, at that time, they weren't playing 250-year-old instruments either. So maybe it's just as authentic to make new ones. So another thing, just very quickly, this is moving on to another sort of research area that's related, I think, in some senses to what Xenakis was doing, is this idea of computer-assisted composition. Xenakis did this generating symbolic materials that he would notate and have performed by traditional ensembles. So we do this. I've got a little example of that here in Open Music. This is some software. This is actually my research. It's where I'm trying to apply psychoacoustic models of hearing to composition. So in this particular case, I'm generating sort of a bunch of chords that are all within the same utter interval, and I want to sort them randomly. They sort of sound like this. So turn it down. But there's about 200 of them. I obviously won't play them, but it's possible to, for instance, sort them from least dissonant to most dissonant, and by dissonant I mean roughness, that sort of beating that you get in sounds. And it's, let me make sure I have the right tool selected. So we can hear it at the beginning. This should be relatively consonant. And what I mean by that becomes apparent if I scroll to the end where it should be dissonant, and you'll hear, there's a lot of them. You'll hear that, in fact, this roughness exists. Go back to the beginning. I don't know if you're hearing it or not, but anyways, the actual description of this takes a little bit longer, and I'm going to skip ahead. But the idea is that there's this whole infrastructure for defining different parameters that are sort of hopefully psychoacoustically based. So, oops, I'm on the wrong thing here. So I can go adjacent interval variance, dissonance, referential commonality, successive relatedness, all these types of things which are related to psychoacoustics. The point just being that that's one of the areas of work that we do that represents a kind of a link between science, in this case psychoacoustics, music cognition and perception, and art and in music. That is similar in some senses to what Xenakis did. Excuse me, time is flying here. So one of the things that I didn't show you is that there's a very important role for feedback. It's not an automatic generation of material. It's a constant. You're choosing always chords from among certain choices. Then the other thing that we associate with Xenakis is sort of using drawing or gestural control, gestures in the sense of drawing to control synthesis in various ways. This is one project that's related to that. Is OM Prisma, symbolic control of spatial sound synthesis. So again, it's related to the previous in the sense that we have a lot of people who are doing work on spatialization and virtual acoustics and these types of things. This is a doctoral student named Marlon Schumacher. He's benefited from a lot of support from CIRMMT, including a CIRMMT student exchange. We have a student exchange program where our students can go and work in someone else's lab for a while. So he went to IRCAM for several months, I think, and worked in the team there and developed this way of sort of symbolically controlling the movement of sound objects. And you can see that on the bottom hand right-hand side. Whoopsie. You can see that over here there are obviously things that have been drawn, and he uses an actual tablet interface. So he's drawing with a pen, similar in a sense to the way that UPIC would have been done, and manipulating it. So this has actually become part of the standard open music distribution now. So you can see that he has a bunch of tools for not just for drawing but for transforming. This is actually an example of an interpolation between two different shapes that he's drawn, and he's the large number of trajectories here that he's developed are actually I think in this particular example he was assigning them to each harmonic of a complex sound, so that you had this sort of feeling of immersive cloud of sound moving around you in which all the different components of the sound were broken up. And just to show you very quickly that this is actually there, if I go to OM Prisma, this is part of, as I say, the standard distribution now of open music, and there it is, and you can take a look at some of these trajectories. So what he's drawn is two different shapes up here. You see on on the left is one, on the right is another, and then he's created this kind of interpolation between them. And all these tools for dealing with trajectories are part of this library that Marlon has developed. And I think, as I said, I'm trying to find projects here which and of course he does a lot of research in actual spatialization. We have our own spatialization engine called ViMic for virtual microphone control that was developed at McGill, and also with Jonas Brasch, who teaches at RPI now in Troy. So he was at McGill and he moved there, but we've had a large grant, and so that's one of the spatialization engines that Marlon would use here, as well as Ambisonics or binaural rendering or any type of thing. And finally, speaking of gestural control, I'm going to skip this a little bit because I'm almost out of time, I think. I don't have too much time. But the idea of using gesture to control synthesis in real time, we know that Xenakis was doing this with, let's say, with a pen interface, but these are, I thought this was something which was similar. It's using gestures, but larger full body gestures or performative type gestures to control spatialization in real time. We do a lot of work here with digital musical instruments at CIRMMT. Marcelo Wanderley is quite a well-known researcher in this area. He's not a musician himself, and so he collaborates a lot with composers and performers. We've had a number of, this is an instrument which was developed at CIRMMT by a number of our students, and it received both technical support, but also direct funding from CIRMMT, the development of this. This is a doctoral student named Fernando Rocha. He's graduated now, but this is his doctoral recital, and he performed a piece for T-Stick, and I'll just play you a small excerpt of it. So it's like drawing graphically in 3 dimensions, I would say. And this instrument knows a lot about how it's being manipulated. It knows its orientation in 3 degrees, but also knows where it's being touched, how much of it's being touched. It's multi-touch sensitive, so if you're touching a lot of it, it has a certain reaction. If you touch a small part of it, it has a certain reaction. I just want to play another video of the same instrument, just because this is one of the people who actually developed it. Is it here? No? There we go. Joe Malik was a doctoral student in music technology, and Andrew Stewart is a doctoral student in composition, and they're both CIRMMT students, and they've also received funding from CIRMMT for this particular project. And this is a performance of Andrew Stewart, who did a huge amount of work on this. And I think just to let you know, there's a latency between the image and the sound that wasn't there in the performance. It's just in the encoding of the video. But just to give you an example of another performance of this instrument. So it's real-time synthesis. That's the thing. I would say that it's this idea of drawing a sound that Xenakis had and extrapolating it much further. So again, there's a delay, but it wasn't there in real time. So I can't help but think that Xenakis might have found that interesting because it's certainly in the spirit of this idea of controlling synthesis. And this is it's physical modeling, and Andrew always needs 2 computers to run this piece because he's running all these different things. I don't know. I kind of think maybe he could optimize his code, but he likes to have multiple 8 cores. The last thing I'd just like to mention, sorry, I beg your pardon, is that we are planning in conjunction with the events surrounding Xenakis that are going to be happening in Montreal starting in the summer, I guess, and going into the autumn, to present a conference, an international conference about Xenakis at CIRMMT. We still actually don't even have our date yet, so we have to, Sharon and I, one of the things hopefully we'll do tonight maybe is talk about this. A call for papers will come out soon, and they'll be sent to far and wide. So we hope that you will stay tuned for that and see if it might be of interest to you. So thank you very much for your attention.